Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Umima's World, the Jelly Moose's Cafe. It is so good to be black in the land of the living once again. Yesterday, I celebrated my birthday, 59 trips around the sun. So it was a very chill day. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to get into part three of this lesson of if you lived during slavery time and educating our youth about slavery. So we're going to just jump right in and pick up where we left off. So last time we left off, we were talking about um, the children working in the fields and starting at such a young age to working on the plantation. So the next question is, was there time for play? And it says that some children that were under 10 worked hard, that there was little time for play, but many did play after they finished their chores. The older children played games around the plantation, in the woods, and on the streets. Often, black children played together with white children. Some of them were even friends. No, they were not friends. They were enslaver and enslaved. So, no, they were not friends. When Frederick Douglass was enslaved, he played on the streets of Baltimore. And when he says that when it was time to choose partners, he remembered being chosen as often as the white children. One enslaved boy said that he would never let the white playmates win at games, even if they were the sons of the enslaver. I love that. Many of them remembered this as a happy time. And for them, I'm sure it was a happy time because they got to be children. At some point, they got to be children and not be working adults. It says some children didn't even know that they were enslaved. Because playtime, they felt free. Harriet Jacobs writes that she didn't know that she was enslaved until she was 6 years old. That's still, 6 years old, you're still a child. So that sentence makes no sense. Sam Alexson, who was enslaved, didn't realize until he was 10. It was a jolt to suddenly learn you were not free like other children. So that goes back to white children and black children on the plantation were not friends. I think I mentioned it in one of the other lesson plans about Kizzy and Missy Ann. They grew up together and they were childhood friends. And then when Missy Ann got older, she asked her papa to give her Kizzy as a gift. And as soon as Kizzy started to show the things that Missy Ann had taught her when they were children, Missy Ann, of course, threw her under the bus. So they were never friends. The games they would play would be like hide and seek, hopscotch, jump rope, and lots of other games. Uh, Now, this next sentence is really stupid. It says they were usually much too poor to buy toys. Well, of course they were poor. They were working for free. Most of them, 99.9% of them. There were some who made some money on the side, but what the hell? I'm sorry. What the heck? They were too poor to buy toys, so children made their own. Okay. They made dolls out of rags, hence the word rag dolls. When they needed marbles, they would roll balls of clay and dry them in the sun. I remember growing up, we used to play jacks, and when we would lose jacks, we would replace them with rocks. Lizzie Davis remembered that everybody was going crazy to ride the flying mare. The children made it themselves out in the woods. It looked like a seesaw, but it didn't go up and down. It spun around in a circle. And when someone gave you a shove, you went flying. Kind of like a merry-go-round and a seesaw in one. Do they still have merry-go-rounds? I've seen the seesaws at some of the playgrounds. Do they still have merry-go-rounds at playgrounds? That merry-go-round was a beast when I was in school. Somebody was always dragged. All right, so how did those that were enslaved help one another? They helped one another in all kinds of ways. They would sneak food to someone who had run away, that may be living in the swamps or woods. They would become family to a child who had been separated and sold from their parents. If they could write, they would write a fake past. for those that could not write and who was trying to self liberate. Sometimes they would give their cotton to a slow picker so that they wouldn't get whipped for coming up short. I remember I used to work at a call center, and we used to get commission on the number of sales that we made. And it was mostly black people because call centers are just modern day plantations. And I remember uh, we would make so many sales on commission because the sales were very easy. And if somebody didn't make their quota or somebody was coming up short, we would tell them to put a sale that I had made under their number so that they could make their quota or so they could, make more money. So yeah, we were still doing that. They would share their food that they got from hunting and fishing. We still do that today, especially if you live in the South and you are a farmer. I remember going to church on Sundays. Those that were farmers would come to church if they drove a truck. They would have vegetables on the back of their truck. So whatever they had gleaned from their garden, they would always bring it to church and share it. What was the one rule that every child would learn? They were taught this rule: never to tell the enslaver or any white person what goes on in the quarters. And that rule still applies today. What goes on in your mama and daddy house stays in your mama and daddy house. And it's so funny because I am a teaching artist and I work with pre-K, and they are very quick to tell at school what goes on in their mama and daddy house. And I'm like, ooh, your mama and daddy did not tell you the golden rule. Passing on information could cause great harm. You might say something about someone who was planning to run away, and if they knew, they would beat them or sell them. You might say something about someone making secret trips to see their family on another plantation, and that could also get them whipped or sold away. Now, sometimes the enslavers would give treats to children for spying on the grown-ups in the quarters, and we still have them today. We have other names for them, but since it's the children that may be listening, I won't say it. You parents can tell them what it's called, but they still do that today. And if you were caught, if you were caught spying, um, you were punished. So that was if they would have, like sometimes they would have the children to be like fanning the flies and things. I think we talked about that before. That was part of their job. But not only fanning the flies, they would be listening to what the enslavers were saying. All right, everyone's safety really depended on you keeping your mouth shut. Were they allowed to get married? Yes. When a man and woman fell in love, they had to go to their owners to get permission to marry. Now, a lot of times it wasn't that they fell in love, but some plantations that were smaller in numbers had to increase their stock, and they may not have had the money to purchase people, so they would make certain women and men get married um, so that they could have more children that they could enslave. Now, if they lived on two different plantations, they could still get married and they would have what they would call a broad marriage. That means that usually the husband would have to get a pass from his enslaver to go and visit his family. Sometimes they would get married in the quarters in secret. There were no laws to protect them, so they could get married on a Saturday, and Monday the enslaver could sell one of them away. They couldn't make a promise to stay together until death do us part. That was if they married in front of the enslaver. If it was something secret in the quarters, I dare say that it was more of an African uh, ceremony where they didn't even, make promises to the enslavers' God or spiritual system, but it was probably more of an African flair to it. Most of the time, the enslavers liked having them marry again because they would produce more children, free labor, and plus they thought that if they got married, they didn't run away as often. And a lot of enslavers, they made more money auctioning off those that they enslaved than they did from selling their crops. It says a wedding was a happy time in the quarters with lots of food and dancing. How did they get married? Well, they had a special ceremony called jumping the broom. You may have seen the movie. One former enslaved person remembered that they just laid the broom on the floor and the couple joined hands and jumped backwards over the broomstick. No, I have not seen that. A lot of Black Americans, a lot of African Americans have adopted um, the ceremony of jumping the broom, and they always jump forward. I have not seen anyone jump backwards. And that just goes to say that we see something or we read something and we don't really um, research it or study it. We just kind of like the Bible. We kind of just see it and then we go with it. So, according to this person who was actually enslaved, he said they would jump backwards. Sometimes it was raised off the ground, which made it harder because you weren't supposed to touch the broom as you jumped. Also, I have read that the person who jumped the highest was the one who ruled the quarters. What was the best time of the year? It says Christmas time was the best. That's when they had some time off for a week between Christmas and New Year's. Work slowed down for those that worked in the house or stopped altogether for those that worked in the field. Now, it depends on how big the plantation that you were enslaved on. If it was a huge plantation, the work for those in the house did not slow down. We know that even today, when Christmas time is coming, your mama had you cleaning up. You were doing extra cleaning. You had to do this and the other, especially if there was going to be company coming. And on the larger plantations, you always had, especially if the enslaver had children that were grown on their own, they were going to be coming home for Christmas. So that increased the work for those that worked in the big house. Now, those in the field, that worked as far as like in tobacco or cotton or whatever, they probably had um, less work to do. But even the drivers and those that were blacksmith and those that were shoeing the horses, their workload would increase because again, most of the planters, most of the enslavers were having big parties at Christmas time. So the work did not slow down. Now, in the previous chapter, we talked about them jumping the broom. A lot of couples, a lot of enslaved people, they would jump the broom or get married at Christmas time because some of them did have that week off and they could spend that week more time with their spouse. I have done pulled information from my ancestors, and my grandmother, she was married twice. She was widowed and then she remarried. And both times she got married in December. Her sister, my great aunt, also got married in December. And I found a lot of my ancestors going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. When they got married in December. So I'm thinking that may have been a tradition that was talked about, from their ancestors. Their mothers and grandmothers may have told them, yeah, we got married in December. We did not become June brides until emancipation and we started to assimilate into Western world and Western culture. So we started to become June brides, which is basically the celebration in honor of the deity Juno, which is a also a goddess of fertility. All right, so the best time of the year was Christmas time. Work slowed down. There would also be religious services and lots of visiting. I don't know what religious services there were. Again, the person who wrote this book is a white woman, and it gives them much pleasure to honestly and truly believe in their heart that our ancestors were true Christians. They were not. So the religious services that they had was more of an African nature, and it really wasn't a religious service. They were just happy to have time off from work. All right. So even today, and even today, most Black people who claim religion, um, Christianity, because most of Black Christians who celebrate Christmas, it's really not about Jesus's birth. It's about having time to spend with your family. A lot of times, people that had been sold away were able to get a pass during the holiday season to go and see their family. And we still have to get that pass at Christmas time to go and see our family. If you're working on a corporate plantation, you have to get permission from your supervisor to take that time off from the corporate plantation, and they give you a pass to be able to go and visit your family. Now, not everybody on the corporate plantation, just like back on the other plantation during slavery time, was going to be able to get a pass, but we still are operating in a lot of plantation rules and regulations. The first thing you would say on Christmas Day, if you saw a friend or a relative, you would say Christmas gift. The trick was to yell it out first so that the person that yelled it to, they would have to give you a present. Especially if you yelled it to the enslaver, they would have to give you a present. Now, a lot of times during the holidays, the Christmas time, they would give them, that's when children would get a new set of clothes, and those clothes would have to last them until next Christmas season. That is when you were turning around 12, 13 years old, um, you would have to, or they would give you shoes. A lot of times the missus would give old dresses and things away to the women as a Christmas gift. They would give them a little bit more food. They may get a whole ham and things of that nature. So, and again, all of this passed on down to us. Nowadays, of course, we can afford to go to the stores and get real Christmas gifts. We're not wearing hand me downs from them anymore. Most of us. Now, there are still a lot of poor people in this country that still go to thrift stores and buy hand-me-downs for their family because they can't afford to go to regular stores or to go to stores and get something brand new. Now, the church being the biggest plantation in America, still operating as a plantation, at Thanksgiving and Christmas time, what do? They go into Black communities and they give away turkeys at Thanksgiving time, and they give away ham at Christmas time. So they're doing the very same thing that the oppressors used to do to us. And then from Christmas to the next Thanksgiving, that community is not thought about. All right, moving on. How would you find out about the latest news? There are lots of ways. If you could read, you could go through your enslaver's mail. You could read the newspapers, uh, especially if you were the one that was sent to the post office to get their mail. You could read it to see what was going on. Those that worked in the big house, they kept their ears open while they worked in the big house. And if you heard news that the enslaver had money troubles, that was terrible news. That meant someone was going to be sold away. And sometimes they would say the name of the people that they were planning to sell because they were in debt. And so a lot of ones that worked in the big house, they would tell the children, and the children would go and dispatch the news to the quarters. As a matter of fact, those that worked in the big house were called dispatchers. There is a movie, and I can't remember the name of it, that talks about this. It's a short film, it's about 20 minutes long, and it talks about Black dispatchers working in the big house. And their role was to listen to find out what was going on and dispatch the information to those that were working out in the field. But we have believed what the white man has written about us and has divided us, calling us And we even call ourselves house N-word and field N-words when all of us were actually enslaved on the same plantation. And yes, you had traders, but it wasn't necessarily the ones that worked in the house. You had some in the fields that were traders as well, and they became overseers. All right, so we got to stop this divisive thing that they have given us. Um, let's see what else. Corn shucking. So it says they had this activity on the plantation called corn shucking. They didn't get to leave the plantation often, so they would have this time called corn shucking time. So after the harvest, the corn was put in high piles, and some was as high as a house. And at lunchtime, oh, this lady. At lunchtime, from other plantations, they would come to help shuck the corn. Shucking means peeling the outside leaves off of the corn cob. Now, there is no way that during lunchtime, because they didn't have that long for lunch. It isn't like we have today, an hour. And most places don't even give you that. They give you 30 minutes. So you were not going to have people that were working out in the cotton field and the tobacco field take their lunchtime that they were going to eat and go walk over to another plantation and shuck corn. Now, this activity may have taken place on Saturday evenings or Sundays when they were not out in the fields. But in order to go from one plantation to another, first of all, you had to have a pass. And I really don't think the enslaver was going to take the time to write 10, 15, 20 passes. So this is a crock. Flag on the play. And it says sometimes hundreds of people worked in two teams. Flag on the play. No, they didn't. Corn shucking really took place around the quarters again on maybe Saturday evenings after the work was done. And you would have a community of people who worked in that community. They may have divided up into teams, but it was not hundreds. Trust me, there was not hundreds. All right. Were there any black people that were free? Yes. Most black people were still enslaved, but by 1860, there were about 488,000 that were free that were living in America, and nearly half of them were in slave states. Most free blacks were not wealthy, but April Ellison was. He bought his freedom. He opened a successful cotton gin repair shop in South Carolina, also became a planter, owning more than 300 acres of good farmland. If you were free, you had a chance to go to school, even if you lived in the South. I don't know what school they were going to, unless they were going to the schools that the missionaries came and opened up from the North. They were still black schools. They definitely were not integrated schools. Many free blacks, like Frederick Douglass, who had escaped on from a Maryland plantation, worked to end slavery. William Steele was a free black man living in Philadelphia, and one of the runaways that he helped turned out to be his long lost brother, Peter. Now, how could you become free? The easiest way was if your mother was free, because then you would be born free. Even if your father was enslaved, you would still be free. You could also be free by your enslaver. He may reward you for serving him. George Washington arranged to have all of his enslaved Africans freed after he and his wife died. Uh, uh, George Washington is another story. We'll deal with him another day. Venture Smith bought his own freedom with money he saved doing extra work. Those that had special skills like carpentry or machinists had an easier time making extra money. Also, chefs. Speaking of Washington, his chef Hercules used to make extra money. Hercules, my baby Hercules. I'm sorry, I just had a Eddie Murphy moment there. Hercules used to make money on the side by selling dinners. He was that good of a chef, and he would take his money, and he didn't buy his freedom. Not, I don't think he could have. I don't think Washington would have parted with him. So he would take his extra money and buy himself really nice clothes. But Hercules also self-emancipated. Walk right out the kitchen and right down the street. Love it. Now going back to the gentleman I spoke of before, Adventure Smith. As soon as he became free, he started saving again, and then he was able to buy his wife and their children, and the whole family ended up being free. Sometimes it didn't work because owners would cheat. They would take their money and never set them free. Could you be made enslaved? Could you be enslaved again even if you were free? Yes, because there was a chance that you could be kidnapped. Kidnappers would grab you and sell you back into slavery, sometimes far away. Now, this next line: kidnappers were criminals. It was against the law to kidnap a free black person. Now, it was only against the law in this country to kidnap free black people and enslave them. You could certainly go to Africa and kidnap free black people and bring them here and enslave them. But once they were here and freed, it was against the law to kidnap them and enslave them. Sometimes I don't believe that Europeans, when they write information about other cultures, really read what they just wrote. I don't think so, because that makes no sense. They made a lot of money doing this. Huh. As soon as they caught you, the kidnappers changed your name, which is exactly what they did when they went to Africa. They changed their names, made it harder for your family to find you. You tried to tell the new enslaver that you were free, you were whipped and told never to talk about it again. Yes, when they brought us here from Africa, and you talked about Africa, you were whipped and told never to mention Africa again. It talks about Solomon Northam, who had been free all his life and was kidnapped and sold to Louisiana and was enslaved for 12 years. Was it dangerous to run away? Absolutely. If they were caught, they were beaten badly or even killed. Uh, the enslavers paid big rewards for captures of runaways. To So the paddy rollers, the slave hunters, the patrollers were everywhere, and because they were property, they had to get their property back because they were losing money. Nowadays, black folks can run away and they're not gonna look for you because you're not worth anything to them anymore. Then if you choose to run away on a Sunday, uh, you could give you a head start because they might not know you were gone until the work started again on Monday. You would worry about the slave hunters' dogs, so you would rub onion or hot pepper on your shoes to get the dogs off your scent. And you walked in the creek where the dogs couldn't smell you. One thing they did also is when they planned to, they would make little balls of cornmeal and they would throw them to the dogs, and the dogs would eat the cornmeal and not pay attention to, chasing someone. And so the cornmeal was to hush the dogs, hush the puppies. Hence where we got hush puppies from. They would put out ads in the papers describing what the runaways looked like. Some of them wore disguises like false mustaches, men dressed like women dressed like men. They found all sorts of ways to escape. They hid in vegetable wagons, they hid on steamships. One man, Henry Box Brown, and I'll do his story, got in a box and mailed himself to freedom, but most of them walked hundreds of miles. Along the way, they were helped by people who hated slavery. They were called abolitionists because they wanted to abolish the terrible practice. Some were white and some were black. And by 1861, there were more than 60,000 uh, enslaved people that had escaped north to freedom. And it talks about the Underground Railroad. We know that the Underground Railroad was led by a lot of people. William Steele was head of the Underground Railroad. We know that Queen Mother Harriet Tubman was the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad as well. And the Civil War came in 1861 when it started. A lot of them ran away to join the Northern Army. They believed that if the North won, that slavery would end. And in 1863, President Lincoln freed all those that were living in the states that were fighting against the North. This is called the Emancipation Proclamation. Flag on the play. The ones that he freed were the ones who were living in the states that were seceding from the Union. Those states who did not fight Lincoln about this war, who kept their mouths shut, got to keep those day enslaved a little bit longer. So in 1863, really, not all of those that were enslaved were free. It was just in those states that were seceding from the Union. What was the first thing you would do when slavery ended? Well, we're still in that, so we don't know. It says when slavery ended, your life as a free person began. Mm. The first thing you would do is look for your family. Many had been sold away, and so it was time to get your family back. Family lived on nearby plantations. It was easier to find them. Um, you may see an ad in the paper, something like information wanted on my children, Lucy and David. When last heard, they belonged to Bill Smith of Athens, Texas. Please send information to this newspaper. And of course, they would get people who were abolitionists, people who could read and write to help them to put these ads in the paper. When did slavery end? I don't know. We're still waiting for that. When the Civil War was over in 1865, the 13th Amendment was added to the Constitution. It made slavery illegal, except for if you committed a crime, you could still be enslaved to pay off your debt to society, which began the process of mass incarceration of Black people all over this country. So we still have Black people who are incarcerated in prisons that sit on plantations. They basically just turn the buildings, the quarters into prisons. And those Black and brown people that are incarcerated are still working 16 to 17 hours a day, especially if you live in the South. You are working in the fields, still picking cotton, still working in tobacco, rice fields. So you are still doing slave labor. You are not being paid for it. If anything, pennies a day. If you are in the north and there is no like fields, cotton fields, and things like that, then you are relegated to work in the industrial. You are making license plates. You are making furniture for big name stores, and I'm going to do an episode on that. So slavery has not ended. Uh, there is still there are more Black people enslaved in the prison population today than there were Black people on the plantation during the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. All right, so that is it. That is the end of If You Lived When There Was Slavery. I hope that you were able to glean from this and get some information. We know that these things that I talked about are not going to be taught in school. Your children will never hear about what it was truly like to be enslaved. And this was kind of light. I didn't really get into a whole lot of things with it because I want to teach the younger children about slavery. Now, I will do probably another uh, episode where it will be for adults. And we will really get into the treatment of those of our ancestors when they were enslaved. But until next time, you know the drill. Love yourself, love each other, stay healthy, give yourself some grace, give others some grace, stay positive, stay black, stay cool. Fall of the year is coming. It's a little bit cooler, and I'm absolutely loving it. Honor your ancestors, and they will honor you. Until next time, family, peace.